Hello my besties! Welcome to today's video. Today is the very last day of February, which means it is time to talk about all of the books that I read this month. In February, I read 13 books total, 3 of which were short stories. As far as genres, I read 4 fantasy books, 6 romance books, 2 mysteries, and 1 general fiction book. I was really in my fantasy era for a while, but I feel like ever since Valentine's Day, I've just been in the mood to read rom-coms. So I feel like that's why romance was my top genre this month. I feel like my top genre has been fantasy for the last few months. This month, I didn't read that many physical books. This is my physical book stack. The rest of the books were obviously read via Kindle or on audiobook because I really utilized Libby this month. With all that out of the way, let's just start talking about the books that I read in February. Okay, the first book that I read in February was Fantasma by Kaylee Smith. I feel like this book started to get really popular in the fall and winter time and is still obviously pretty popular. It's available on Kindle Unlimited, so that's how I read it. I've heard a lot of people describe it as a crossover between Kingdom of the Wicked and Caraval, and I completely agree. As someone who really enjoyed both of those books, I also really enjoyed Fantasma. It was just like a super easy fantasy read in the sense that it was a page turner, there wasn't a lot of world building, the romance was interesting, our main character had to go through these trials on each night of Fantasma, which kept me wanting to read and know what was going to happen next. And yeah, I ended up giving this one 4 stars. It was very bingeable. I would honestly recommend this one to help you get out of a reading slump if you're in one. Obviously, this book won't work for everyone. I've seen some people really not like it, but I feel like if I was in a reading slump, I would really enjoy this book and it would help me get out of the slump. Next book I read was also on Kindle. It was Assistant to the Villain by Hannah Nicole Mayer. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce her last name. This book was described to me as just a fun, lighthearted fantasy read with pretty low stakes, and it is definitely that. It was super silly and quirky, and honestly, while I was reading it, I was kind of imagining it taking place in like the Shrek universe, just because there's such like a wide variety of characters, and it was so unserious. I didn't end up enjoying this one as much as I thought I was going to. I honestly wasn't sure I was going to continue the series until I got to the very end of Assistant to the Villain, and it left off on a bit of a cliffhanger, and I wanted to know what was going to happen next. So, as you'll see later on in the video, I ended up reading the second in the series, but I ended up giving Assistant to the Villain 3.25 stars. Very specific of me. But yeah, once again, a very easy read, but in a very different manner. Phantasma was very dark. Assistant to the Villain was very light. Following Evie, who is in need of work, so she finds herself becoming, obviously, the assistant to the villain, who of course ends up being a bit misunderstood, and there's a lot more to him than just being a villain. As you could probably imagine, as the story progresses, Evie and the villain become friends, start to become more than friends, have feelings for each other, but are completely denying it. It's definitely very much of a slow burn, but I feel like I'm starting to talk a little bit about the plot of the second book, so we'll move on and talk about the next book that I read in February, which I actually have the physical copy of. It was Deep End by Ali Hazelwood. I ended up reading this one in my video that I posted on Valentine's Day where I read romance books for a day. That video was really fun, so you guys should watch it if you want to. This one follows Scarlett, who's on the diving team at Stanford, and Lucas, who's on the swim team at Stanford. They kind of appear to be an unlikely pair on the outside, but as you learn more about them, you find out that they're actually really, really compatible. As with all of Ali Hazelwood's books, Scarlett is a woman in STEM, so there's also kind of like a subplot where they're working on this biology project together. We also get some cameos from Adam and Olive from the Love Hypothesis, so that was really fun. But yeah, this honestly felt like reading fan fiction, which honestly isn't a bad thing. I would just know that going into it. This overall just wasn't my favorite Ali Hazelwood read. It was a fun, good time, but like I said, not my fave, so I gave this one also a 3.25 stars. Okay, then I read The Fall Risk by Abby Jimenez. This book was also read in that video I was talking about. It is a short story that's available on Kindle, and I was so happy when I found it on Kindle because I was so excited to have something to read by Abby Jimenez because I've read her entire backlist and I'm just eagerly awaiting for her new book to come out in April. But The Fall Risk actually took place around Valentine's Day, so it was really fun to read it around Valentine's Day. I love when my reads line up to where I am in like the year, if that makes sense. Or if I'm reading a book and it takes place in a place that I am. Love that as well. But yeah, if you love Abby Jimenez's writing, you need to read this. You'll love it. It was super short and everything happened pretty fast, but great just little palate cleanser, and I'll read anything that woman writes. I didn't end up rating this one. I find it kind of hard to rate short little stories like that, but just know that I enjoyed it. Then piggybacking off of that, I read The Situationship by Abby Jimenez, which is another little short story that I found on Kindle by her. Also so cute. Didn't give this one a rating either. This one was even shorter than the last one. It follows Maddie from Just for the Summer and Doug from Part of Your World and shows their little meet cute. But at the very end of it, there's a sneak peek for Say You'll Remember Me, which is Abby Jimenez's new book that's coming out. So if you want that sneak peek, it's at the end of this short story. Okay, and then the final book that I read in that romance reading vlog was Picking Daisies on Sundays by Liana Sincotti. And I had mentioned that I really liked this author's other book. I read it back in December, so I was so excited to get to this one. I didn't end up loving it as much as I liked her other book. It fell a little bit flat for me. Following Daniela and Levi, who became best friends freshman year of high school. Daniela developed some feelings for Levi, confessed them to him senior year of high school, and Levi did not reciprocate these feelings, so they kind of went their separate ways until they stumble upon each other in a bar in New York City their senior year of college, and they find themselves in a situation where they start fake dating. And it's very interesting because Daniela's feelings for him never really went away, but you don't really know what's going through Levi's head in the beginning of the book. But yeah, it was a fun plot, and I do like following along with Leonis and Cotty's main female characters as they kind of like discover themselves. She has very like coming of age main female characters, if that makes sense. But yeah, like I said, it fell a little bit flat for me and I ended up rating it 3 stars. Next, I read Us Against You by Frederick Bachman, the second book in the Beartown series. When I read Beartown last year, I absolutely loved it, absolutely adored that book. So I don't know why it took me so long to get to this one. Actually, I do. They're kind of heavy, and I'm not always in the mood for something like this. As I said, I've been kind of in my rom-com era. Because in this series, Frederick Bachman just has such a beautiful way of writing about the horrible things that we do as people and as societies, and calling them out in such subtle ways that make you realize that it's happening all around you all the time. This book focuses a lot on misogyny and toxic masculinity. It takes place in this very small town in Sweden where hockey is everybody's lives. And because of this, they let a lot of things slide in their culture if it's going to be benefiting the hockey team, and as like the economy of this town is also pretty dependent on hockey as well. But anyways, this series is amazing. It's very well written and I really recommend it if you're okay with shedding a few tears. I gave this one 4.5 stars. It wasn't quite 5 stars. Beartown was 5 stars for me. This one wasn't quite, but still obviously loved it. Next, I read another Kindle short story. It was called The Fan by Alexandra Romanoff. This was just a wonderful fan fiction-esque fun time. Our main character is a DC campaign advisor. So she works in politics and has dealt with all the crazy things that have to do with working in politics. Opportunity arises for her to work with her celebrity crush who was in a boy band from when she was younger on a campaign. So in my mind, I was thinking like One Direction, this is Harry Styles, even though he was described not to look like Harry at all. I wrote, this is like if the idea of you was actually good. And I gave this one 3.5 stars because like it wasn't amazing, and there was one little thing at the end that I was like, ugh. But overall I had a great time. As I previously alluded to, then I read Apprentice to the Villain, the second book, and I think it's going to be a trilogy by Hannah Nicole Mayer. And like I said, I enjoyed this one a lot more than I enjoyed the first one. I think it was because I really enjoyed like the yearning aspects between our two main characters. Our male main character is so damn bad for the female main character Evie, and I'm always going to enjoy that. The banter was really cute and it was giving like rom-com meets fantasy. But yeah, I gave this one 4 stars. I'll definitely continue the series since there's only one more book coming out. Then I finished this series. I'm really glad I finally finished the Good Girl's Guide to Murder series because I put it on my 25 books to read in 2025. There's so many sounds going on outside my window right now. I hope you can't hear them. Literally a siren, a leaf blower, and I think a fire alarm. Hope everybody's okay. Okay, we're back. I had to wait for some of those sounds to stop, but I think we should be good now. As I was saying, I finally completed this trilogy. My 25 books to read in 2025, I have a lot of completing series. Like I said, this is one of them. Good Girl, yeah. Good Girl, Bad Blood is the second book in the trilogy. One thing that I really loved about these books are like all the mixed media bits. Like you get pictures, you get like transcripts from Pip's podcast that she starts in this book. I really liked finding out in this book why the first book was called A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. That was a fun little tidbit. In the first book, A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, our main character Pip uncovers the real mystery of a murder that takes place in her town that the town police had settled, but a lot of people had like reservations about the conclusion that they came to, especially Pip. Pip uncovers the real truth in the first book of that mystery. And then in the second book, Pip can't help herself. Has to uncover the truth behind another mystery. Pip is really struggling. Promised herself and her family she wouldn't involve herself in these dangerous cases again. As it caused her family suffering, it causes her so much mental suffering. But like I said, poor girl just can't help herself. Which brings me into the third and final book in the series, which is As Good as Dead. Once again, the police are not listening to our girl Pip. If the police would just listen to Pip and look into the things she tells them to look into, everything would be so much easier. The police could solve these crimes and Pip could rest easy. But no, the police do not listen to Pip, so she has to take it upon herself again to solve yet another mystery. As these books go on, the mysteries become more and more personal to Pip, and she devolves more and more because she's endured so much trauma and so many horrible things, to the point that this book took a very unexpected turn. At least I didn't see it coming. This book gave me so much anxiety because I just wanted Pip to be okay, and I was so stressed trying to figure out how she was gonna work this out. But yeah, I ended up loving the end of this book, the conclusion of the whole series. Definitely recommend these books if you haven't read them. I feel like a lot of people have read the Good Girls Guide to Murder series though. But yeah, they're just a super fast-paced YA mystery series with a really awesome female main character, such page turners, and really entertaining. And like I said, this one was a bit anxiety-inducing for me though. Okay, after those I needed something light because even though they are a YA mystery, they got dark. So I picked up The Love of My Afterlife by Kirsty Greenwood. Worked out that the audiobook for this one had just become available for me on Libby. So I read some of the physical book and then listened to some of the audiobook while I was like cleaning my house and stuff. But yeah, this book has a super silly premise. Basically, our main character passes away. She wakes up in the afterlife. She meets this woman who's kind of supposed to be her guide through the afterlife. While she's in this in-between place, she meets this man. And she immediately knows that this man is her soulmate. That man leaves the in-between place because he wasn't supposed to die. He goes back onto Earth. Our main character's guide is like obsessed with romance novels and romance stories. So she's like, oh my God, you need to go back to Earth. You have 10 days to kiss him. And if you kiss him, you can stay alive. But if not, you'll have to come back and spend the rest of the eternity with me and be in the afterlife. And our main character, Delphi, doesn't want to die. She wants to go back to Earth, and she definitely doesn't want to spend the rest of eternity with this guide because she finds her pretty insufferable. She definitely has a lot of comedic relief in the story. And she wants to find love. So she's like, okay, I'm gonna go back to Earth and complete this mission. Super crazy premise to a story, but it ended up being way deeper than I anticipated. I had such a fun time reading and listening to this book. It felt super British. The audiobook is narrated by an English woman, and in the video where I read this, I said it gave me major Bridget Jones Diary vibes. It's just such a fun time. Yeah, I ended up giving this one 4 stars. And then I finished out the month of February reading Emily Wilde's Compendium of Lost Tales by Heather Fawcett, the 3rd and final book in the Emily Wilde series. I read this one on my Kindle as well. I was lucky enough to get it from the library, from the Libby app, because the paperback isn't out yet. Obviously, in the States we come out with the hardcovers first, but I have the first 2 in paperback, so I'm gonna wait to purchase it until I can get it in paperback so my whole series can match. But anyways, I was just so happy to be back in this world. I absolutely adore the Emily Wilde series. I love Emily, I love Wendell, I love Emily's dog Shadow. I know some people don't love these characters, but I find them so, like, they are insufferable, but in like the most endearing way possible. I don't know how else to put it. Emily and Wendell have a goal, a mission to complete that has to do with the fairy realm in this one. It's like, what can you say about a 3rd book in a series when you're trying to review it without giving spoilers? Not much. But basically, Emily and Wendell have this goal that they need to complete that has to do with them being in the fairy realm. Emily is trying to complete this mission, complete this goal for her and Wendell by using everything she knows about the fairy lore and all these fairy stories and trying to find a way to incorporate those stories into what they need to do in real life, because basically these legends and this lore is coming into play in real life. And a lot of this book is just vibes. It's just, you gotta sit back and enjoy the vibes because Emily goes on a lot of little rants, side quests. But if you love the vibes, you'll love this series. And I'm one of those people who loves the vibes. How many times did I just say vibes? Anyways, I don't think this was my favorite book in the trilogy. I really actually enjoyed the 2nd book in the series. I think that might have been my favorite. Anyways, I was very happy with how the series ended, and I had a great time reading it and spending time with these characters again, so I gave it another solid 4 stars. With that, those are all the books that I read in February. It was a pretty fabulous reading month. I didn't get any 5 stars though, so hopefully I have a 5-star coming my way in March. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. I would love to know your favorite book that you read in February. I think my favorite was probably Us Against You by Frederick Bachman, just because this series has me in a chokehold. But yeah, I hope you have an amazing rest of your day, and I hope to see you next week for next week's video. Bye!